Good afternoon. Welcome to today's CI Tools webinar. My name is Josh Osborne and I'm the Product Manager for the CI Tools here at Central Innovation. And this is a weekly webinar that we run where we look at stuff to do with the CI Tools. Sometimes it'll be looking at a tool as if you're a beginner user. Sometimes we'll be looking at frequently asked questions, and sometimes we'll be talking about new things in updates or things that maybe you didn't know in older updates. This week we're going to be looking at the Detail Elements tool. This is a tool that's been available for quite a while inside of New Zealand, and just a bit more recently has been made available in Australia as well. And as the name implies, it has a large amount of detail elements inside it to help you with your detailing. So we're going to have a look through what's available in there just so you have an idea of what you can use there that you won't have to draw up yourself. Before we get started though, just a couple of things. If you have any questions as we go through this, just enter those in the chat panel wherever you're watching this. I will pause the video about halfway through to check if there's any questions and see if I can answer those on air. I'm also going to be working in ArchiCAD 27 today, but the detail elements that we're going to be looking at have pretty much all been there for quite a few years. So if you're using an older version, in 99.9% of cases, you will have what you'll see here today anyway. Yeah, that's about it, I think. So let's have a look at the tool. The first thing you need to know about using Detail Elements tool is how you get access to it. Similarly to some of our other tools, it is available via a separate tool in your toolbox. This is it here. There's two ways that you can get this into your toolbox. The first is that you can just apply our work environment. So if you go to Options, Work Environment, Apply Profile, and choose the CI Tools profile, it will automatically add that into your toolbox. So you can just hit that and apply that to your toolbox. If you want to add it manually, maybe you already have a customized toolbox or something like that, you can go in and do so by going to the toolbox section here, finding Detail Elements. It will be around near the bottom here, along with the other add-ons. Select that, select the place that you want to insert it, and just press Add Selected, and then you can drag it around to where you want it to be. And as you can see in my toolbox, by default it will be in the document chunk of the toolbox if you're using our work environment. And you can see it here placed just above dimension. So to get started with the tool, just double click on it here. Now what I'm going to do today is the way that the tool works is that essentially the name describes exactly what it is. It's just a big pile of different elements of details that you might want to be able to use. They will place down as 2D elements, so you can place them anywhere that you would place 2D elements, and they're just 2D detail drawings, so there's no additional considerations you need to make or anything like that after placing them. So what we're going to be doing today is just going through and looking at all of the objects that are available so you have an idea of what is available for you to use here without having to draw it yourself. Because that's the key point of the Detail Elements tool, is to basically make it so that for a large amount of types of detail bits or elements, you won't have to go and either draw it yourself or find a detail on a manufacturer's site or something like that. You can just grab the detail element and it will essentially do that work for you. So we're going to go through and have a look at those so that you have a rough idea of what's available, and you can refer back to them when you do get to doing your detail drawing. So I'll start from the top and we'll just run through each of the folders on the way through so that you can see what we have available. So starting off in the general folder, you can see the folder structure is broken up into a sort of a sensible looking series of folders so that you can roughly find what you're looking for, although of course you can use the search option up the top if you want something specific and aren't sure which folder it will go in. But starting from this one, we have the first element in here is the custom profile element, and what this will do is it will just read in a list of all of the custom profiles in your project, and it will give you a 2D representation of that profile. So this is a nice easy way to just get a detailed view of any profile that you have in your project. You can just go through and choose the profile. So we select that there. We can rotate it if we need to. Hit OK and place it down, and it will just go down as it looks in the complex profile editor, a custom profile editor rather. Not really much extra settings to that one. This one looks a little bit different from the other tools because it is simply representing something that already exists. So the main controls are pretty minimal there. If you do want to override the attributes, though, you can do by choosing custom here, and then you can make those do whatever you want them to rather than what's specified in the profile. Composite lining. This object looks a bit more like the rest of the detail elements, so we have some settings available here. So we can choose, this is for drawing up composite lining if it hasn't come through into your details based on what you have modeled for whatever reason. You can create your own lining here, so you choose the number of linings that you want to display, and then over on the right here you'll get a drop down showing you a selection for each of the linings you have selected. So if you have 3, there'll be 3. If you set 7, there'll be 7, and then you can just go through and specify what each lining should look like. So you can specify the gap between linings, the thickness of the lining, and then the line type and the attributes for that. The way that it appears can be based on either a fill or the building material as well. So you can go through and make those changes there, and then place it down, and then once you have it placed in your project, you'll see that there's a variety of hotspots on this so that you can manipulate the shape of this to fit whatever it is that you're wanting it to put it on. So you can grab hold of these end purple hotspots to add additional lengths, and you can grab the middle ones to add additional nodes to existing edges. So it works very similarly to how any of the other polygon shaped tools in ArchiCAD work. And you can just go through and build up your composite lining using that. Next one is the flashing tool. This one works in kind of a similar way to the composite lining as well, actually. So it's just to draw up a single piece of flashing. We just have the configuration settings for this one and a couple of settings available here. So you can choose how the flashing profile should look. So you can go and say a guttery, for instance, or an L shape, and it will go through and set that shape based on what we want. Let's go with a barge for this one. We can choose the thickness of the flashing, so we can make that 3 mils. We can change the radius of the bends, so you can see that affecting that there. We've got the attribute controls, same as before, so you can choose the pen and line type, and you can also choose to use a fill or the building material. And then you can control how the folds work at the ends. So this one has a bird's beak fold at the first edge. You can choose to have a kick out instead, a hem, or nothing at all. Let's go for the hem on that one. And then the last edge, you can also do the same. So we can do a kick out, bird's beak, or hem ending as well. So let's put hems at both ends. We can control the settings of the hems as well if you want to. And then we just hit OK, place that one down, and it will place that shape that we selected, and then the folds that we have selected on the ends as well. And again, it's just drawing up that. Obviously, you could do this yourself using a bunch of lines and or fills to do the same job. This is just doing a lot of that work for you, so you don't have to worry about it, which is the whole point of the tool. Insulation. We'll just draw up a piece of insulation for you. This one will allow you to choose what kind of insulation you want to use, so if it should be bats or if it should be polystyrene, which will just display as a sort of a block or a solid piece. I'll go with the bats for this one just because it looks more interesting. We've got some control over the thickness, or I guess the depth of the insulation and the length of the piece that we have, as well as a C ratio here, which is the amount that it drops down from being straight. So if we can go in here and enter a 50 or something, you'll see that that has a bit of a curve to it, and you can choose where the anchor point for that is as well. And then we have the same attribute controls over on the right. So if we place this one down, you'll be able to see that there. And then we can grab these purple hotspots. Whenever you're using detail elements, always keep on the lookout for purple hotspots, because they mean that you can edit something. And so we can just drag this out to as long or as short as we need it to. And note that it always ends at the same type of part of the insulation. And starts with the same, so you don't need to worry about if you were using a line type or something like that, making sure that it ends on what you would want it to. It will just handle that. So yeah, so we can move that in and out. We can adjust that droop factor as well using a different hotspot. So when you're using detail elements, do make sure that you have a look at what the various hotspots do, because there's quite a lot of control in some of them over the way that the display works, that you can do graphically rather than having to set in the settings. Alright, lining. This one's very similar to the composite lining, only it is a single piece. This time, again, something you could do really easily using a fill. This is just getting rid of you having to do that extra work. So we've got the length and the width of the lining. If we want to have miters on the ends, so we could go in here and add miters there, and we'll have both ends closed. Same attribute settings as with everything else, and it will just do what we told it to. And you can see we've got some purple hotspots on the ends here to allow us to adjust that angle, so we can change that to 45 and that sort of thing. Again, very simple, just to shortcut a bit of extra time for you. Steel sections works in a quite similar way to the custom profile, except that rather than using the custom profiles in your project, it uses a preset list of a bunch of different steel section types, regardless of whether you have them set up in your project or not. These are just built into the object. So we can come through and say we want to use a Z purlin. We'll use this specific type of Z purlin, and we'll use this specific preset size of Z purlin, and it will preset all of the sizes to exactly what we chose. We've got those same attribute settings as we have in most other objects here, and we just hit OK, and we've got that drawn up for us. So it's nice and easy to select what you need and then get it placed without having to do much extra work. You can just go through and choose what you like, hit OK, and it does that for us. Timber member, again, works very similarly. This one, this time for a timber member instead of for a steel section though. So we can choose what type of timber member it should be. So we can choose timber blocking, or let's go doubled so we can see that. If you choose some of the other ones, you will be able to see some control over the shape as well. So horizontal laminate shows us that, and then we get to control the shape of the laminate piece. So you can chamfer the corner or whatever you'd like. I'm just going to go back to doubled here, and we get the same controls over on the right as with everything else, and then these dimensions just define the actual section view, so the height and width, and then in our case, because we're using double, we've got the gap between the two pieces as well. So we can hit OK on that, and it just draws that up for us. And the last one in this folder is the timber member polygon. This works in roughly the same way as the previous one did, except it will allow us to modify the shape. So you can see there's some controls over that here. If I hit OK, that will place, and you'll see that we have purple hotspots on all the edges now, so we can manipulate the shape of this. So if you do have something that is slightly irregular in some way, you can make that by placing that and then adjusting these hotspots to whatever you need them to do. Floors are a variety of floor details, obviously. This one here, we are running a little bit slower than I thought it would be, so I'm going to move a little bit faster now. This decking board element will show you some decking board. Obviously, you can choose whether there should be a grip tread on the top or just smooth. And then once you do make your selections, you can choose the settings for the grooves and that sort of thing. And so that will look like this. And we get purple hotspots on the end to allow us to resize it. And obviously the resize, rather than just stretching out what we have, we'll just add repeats of this element for as long as we need it to cover. So it means, again, you don't have to worry about redrawing all those bits in or copying and pasting a lot of individual boards or something. It just does that. Floorboard works in the same way. So we set what the profile needs to be and the settings of the profile. And then once we have it placed, we have hotspots on the end, which will let us stretch the element, which will just add in additional boards in this case. And the floor framing again works quite similarly in that we have a section that we're stretching. This one allows us to choose what the boundary joists and regular joists are for this. So we can say vertical laminate for the boundaries and I-beam for the regulars, and then put in some, let's put in some fiber insulation as well. Hit OK for that, and it will go through and give us that. So you can see I've got that laminate chosen here. We've got our I-beams showing in between, and then we've got our insulation showing in between each part as well. So you can use that to draw up your whole section view of the floor framing that you need there. Walls, these ones work in a similar way, but obviously they go up and down instead of side to side in most cases. You can obviously rotate these to any degree that you want them to, but we've got a handful of different ones of these. So we've got some brick wall sections. We'll just draw up a sectional brick wall, and again we can stretch it and it just repeats the units there, and these settings cover most of what you would imagine they would do. You can change that to round, so you'll see rounded mortar in between and that sort of thing. Concrete block sections work in a similar way, except they are hollow blocks in this case, so they can be resized to repeat and that sort of thing. And then you can choose the settings for those and what kind of blocking they are as well. So you could say that the top block and base block are different. And it'll just do that for you. So you can see that we've got a rebate there, and this is open at the end, which is what we asked that to do. Concrete block is literally just a concrete block by itself. You can control the way that displays, and it will place a piece of mortar at the end there, which we can draw out to draw more concrete blocks in if you want. That one's obviously in plan view rather than in section view though. Furring sections, this will allow us to control some basic settings here. So you can control most of the attributes and the sizings as you would expect. You can control the profile as well. So we could choose something like this, hit OK, and it will just draw that up for us. So again, a nice way of making it so that you don't have to either find a DWG of this or draw your own. And these can all be moved around independently of each other. They'll conform to the spacing that you tell them to have. So if you make the spacing lower, we'll get much more of these squeezed in there. What have we got here? Floor wall framing works quite similarly to the floor framing. So we choose the ribbon and top plate types here. We can choose to include lintels and sills as well. And the bottom plate is set over here. And we also have the options to add an insulation, which we're calling loopy, and control the attributes over here. And if we place that one down, you'll see that representation of the frame. So you can see we've got our opening set up in there, which we had turned on. We've got our top and bottom plates, and it is showing our insulation built into there as well. Wall board section will give us essentially some weatherboards. There's a couple of different options for the specific way you want the weatherboards to work in here. So we can go through and choose any of those. Choose the size of the boards here and the way that the boards are set out over here, and then it will just give us a nice cut through of those boards, and again you can stretch those to cover whatever you need. And then lastly, in the wall section, we've got the wall frame section here. So again, this works in a very similar way to the previous one. And we can control linings and insulation and attributes here. And you'll get a similar looking thing, so we can stretch out the parts of it and that sort of thing. Next thing is roofs. I'm just going to quickly pause and check, see if there's any questions. I'll be back in about 10 seconds. All right, we have one question from someone asking about looking for some video for the wall covering and roof coverings. I have covered those in previous sessions, so I will, once I've finished today's webinar, I will just reply to you with a link to that one so that you can get in and see those. You'll also be able to find them on our YouTube channel if you look there as well, but I'll send you a direct link. And if you have any specific questions about those coverings, let me know and I can cover them during next week's session. So back on the detail elements, we're looking at the roof now. We've got fascia boards. A lot of these will be, if you're using our coverings tool, will be done for you in a lot of ways, but if you want to draw these yourself, obviously, or if you're not using our covering, you have the options here. They all work in very similar ways, as you'll see as I go through them. We can choose what kind of gutter to use for the gutter. The ridge cap, same again. We can choose what kind of ridge cap to use, and then we have our attribute controls there. Cladding profile, same again. We can choose the profile that we want for the cladding. If we want to see a section or elevation view, and the pitch of the roof, and that will draw that up for us. Roof cladding section will show us a section view of like a complete piece of cladding. So for instance, if we have tiles selected here, you can adjust the settings for those tiles. You can adjust the attributes here, and then it will create a repeating repeating piece of roof framing that we can just drag across there, and it will draw us in all of those tiles as it goes across. Again, if you're using the coverings tool, you won't need this, but this is a good way of drawing those up if you're not using coverings in this particular case. And then there's a handful of different trusses. I won't go through all of these, they work in the same way, but we've got gable end, girder, jack, monopitch, rafter, scissor, and truncated girders. All of them work in roughly the same way. So you have a setting for the span here. You choose what each end should be. In this case, we've got the options of making them heels or bird's mouth. You can choose to have them symmetric, and you've got the values for the angles and any other values that would apply there. And then over on the right, you can control the specifics of the actual pieces of the truss. So you can see that this one looks quite similar to this one here. So we've got the same sort of settings here. And if I go to the girder truss, you'll see very similar looking settings there as well. So it should cover most types of trusses you might want to draw up. And then the last one here is a truss in section instead. So this is showing a sectional view of the trusses, and we can control the size and spacings here, and then the attributes can be controlled there. And then that will draw that in for us. Ceiling just has the one for now, which is just a bunch of ceiling battens. You can choose to put insulation over the battens as well. And again, it will give us a nice repeating section there, so you can see our insulation covering the battens. Doors and windows, this is an element that just does glass. This is essentially the same as the lining element that we saw before. The only reason for this to be different is just so that you can find it in a different place depending on what you're looking for. And there's also a sealant bead as well, which works in exactly the way you would expect it to. It just places that bead in. Interior trims has a couple of different types of trim profiles that you can just draw down. In a lot of cases you might be able to use the custom profile to do these if you have these already set up, but if not, there's a handful of different types of trim here, so we can come in and choose whatever we want them to do, set the way that we want them to look. We can edit the shape if we need to, and we can control the attributes for them as well. So we've got the interior trim, the scotia, and the skirting. Fastenings is a variety of different fastening types. So we've got bolt, a whole bunch of different bolt types, joist hanger, a single nail. Each of these have a lot of settings as well to them. So if I choose the CI Tools bolt, for instance, there's a handful of different types of bolt. And then depending on what you choose, you can control all of the dimensions of that bolt as well. If there should be washers, and if so, what type, and all of that sort of thing. We've also got this nail plate, a couple of different fixing type elements, a rivet, a screw, and a threaded rod are all available in the fastenings section. Reinforcing is similar in that it is just a big collection of the same sorts of things. So if you're working on reinforcing, we've got this rebar element here, which will let you place that down, and then you can grab hold of the hot spots on it to make it fit whatever it is that you need to draw there. And it's doing the radiusing around the corners and that sort of thing. So again, not something that you couldn't do using lines and fills, but just makes it a much easier way of handling that. Reinforced beam works very similar. So does the cage, the mesh, the rod, and the reinforced starter is a sort of a free-form version of that same element. So you can come in here and grab hold of these nodes here to make whatever shape you might need. And then the last folder here is the symbols, just a handful of these. These are just 2D symbols to use on whatever you need them for. We've got a break line, which will do what it sounds like. So in this case, we're drawing top and base break lines. You could do left and right break lines instead, as you can see here. You can control the dimensions of the parts of those and the angle of the line itself as well. And then you can choose to draw a masking fill inside or outside the break lines, and it will go ahead and do that. So you can see with it selected, you can see the masking fill placed down there, and you can modify the angles and size of the parts of the break line there. Cylinder break line works in a very similar way. The roof pitch will just give you a nice 2D representation where you can fill in the roof pitch there, and the weld symbol will let you construct a weld symbol by going through and choosing the different symbols and where they should be displayed in relation to each other. There's a handful of different options available here. So you choose the way that you want it to be set out, and then you can control the attributes over here and place that down as well. So that is the Detail Elements library. I went a little bit over time there, sorry. So those will all be available in the Detail Elements tool in the toolbox there, if you have the Detail Elements tool. If you have any questions about either this tool or about the CI tools in general, or if you have any topics you'd like to see covered in future versions of this webinar, please let me know by just contacting our support desk. You can email them on nz.support@centralinnovation.com and just say, hey, I would really like to see you cover how to make whatever it is you want to know, and that will make its way through to me, and I can cover that in a future webinar session. I'll just quickly check and see if there's any further questions before I finish up. Okay. All right, Looks like no further questions. I'll get back to you about the coverings thing. But thanks for your time, everyone. If you have any suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll catch you at the next one. Thanks.